Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Welcome in. What's going on, Ivan? How's it going? What a melt up. Day six. I can't even believe that we've actually had about 6 green days in a row since we literally bottomed. After making a higher low on SPY here. That's insanely crazy. What's going on, Rajesh? But nonetheless, it's a very busy week. Obviously, we heard from Fed Powell yesterday. We saw the little, I want to say, a little red candle that he caused because it got bought up real quick. We also had Daly make some comments intraday here today that caused a little bit of a red candle that got bought up yet again. So if this trend kind of continues with all the Fed speakers that we continue to have this week, then it's going to be quite interesting because what's going to be that trigger that really pretty much snaps the 6 day green streak that we're on right now for SPY. And that's what I'm pretty much just on the headline on the cusp of watching right now. You pretty much hear Avery trying to go through every scenario I think possible on live, those of you that are listening in. But I know that right now, granted the fact that you have a 6 day green streak, you have to be a little bit more cognizant about the fact that you are more vulnerable, especially to any kind of concern that will spark any kind of fear in the market. So even though we had the two comments between Fed Powell yesterday and Daly today, those weren't necessarily as alarming as we expected because they literally got bought right back up. So I'm going to continue to watch. We'll see what Powell actually has to say tomorrow. The only scary part about tomorrow is that Powell actually speaks before the market opens. So I believe it's roughly about 30 minutes before the open. So you won't be able to do anything with any positions that you have that you're holding overnight. So those of you that do have anything overnight, I'm hoping that you guys are pretty much holding something light, that you don't have a full size position or anything crazy that you're not pretty much willing to lose because anything can pretty much flip the script. And at this point, yes, it's basically upon whatever he's going to end up saying and the fear that it's pretty much going to bring to the market. So, again, big picture, Feds are on the highlight. What's really going to take to really snap this 6 day green streak right now that SPY is currently on? I thought today on the watch list here that I pretty much will go across the queues as we pretty much see some of the names in the queues have more relative strength than others. And I think that's probably why it's more of a highlight that I actually go through all the queues rather than maybe take the take a request today. So I'll go through the queues today. That'll pretty much be our watch list that we'll be going off of to wrap up today's session. So let me go through the queues. Let's see what names actually have relative strength. Some names that maybe have some upside potential still, and some that maybe look to seem like they're at resistance right now. All right. But real quick before we jump into the queues, just pretty much looking at current situation on SPY here right now. The only thing that's actually changed off of my projection from yesterday is that I actually added my upper white line here, which was my upper overall target on this entire move that we had. So I had my resistance yesterday. We were sitting right around this 449 half. As we see, the body of the candle pretty much closed right there in today. So I'm going to be watching to see if we get continuation over the high of today. That was 450.58. If we get continuation over that, then my overall PT is pretty much sitting just about 452 flat. So that's what I'll be watching is that 452 flat if we get that push. Otherwise, if we get any kind of retracement and we lose today's low, which was 445.86, then I'm flirting with pretty much coming down towards the anchored VWAP that we have dated back from the recent high of January 4th, in which we can come down as low as 441.31, and we would pretty much imply that volatility is still going to be relatively existent here, and that's going to likely cause about maybe an 8 point move for what we know. All right, so that's what I'm pretty much watching, well defined in terms of uptrend and downtrend here. I think we can come down as low as 441 tomorrow, granted the fact that, of course, depending what the Feds really say tomorrow, or we can really continue this push. 452 would be on my high end. If we really went above that 452, then I'm watching right around 452.90 would be where I would stretch. I just don't expect to go above that range tomorrow. Even though granted the fact we had about a 5.2 in the move today. That's about 1.17% today. I don't expect to get that big of a move tomorrow. If we do continue to stay green tomorrow, I think it's going to be more of an inside kind of day. Usually that you have, but what I would more so consider it's going to be a consolidation out of this entire move. So it's not going to be as drastic. That's why I don't expect to go past 452 to break over 453. I want to say. I think we're going to continue to hover here between this current level and 453, in which we consolidate tomorrow more so. Otherwise, 441's in target for the downside here. All right. Looking into the tickers that I was watching, of course, Tesla was pretty much just an insane move that we saw today. That was definitely a intraday breakout that we had. I think that pretty much just went under the radar. For the most part, I know that Aero is pretty much looking a little bit more sore towards the downside. I wasn't expecting this kind of explosive move. I think 950 to 951 was my high end target that I potentially had on Tesla. But it looks like the volume pretty much ramped up intraday, and that's really what caused that spark that we had. So in terms of targets and upper range and lower range, obviously you see the anchored view up from our most recent high here, um, in which that was from November 4th of last year. We ended up breaking that very convincingly. That was that 976 mark, which you saw us hovering for just a bit off of that explosive move, and then we just got beautiful continuation off of it. So if we do get retracement, I am looking to see if we get a pullback and maybe a support test off of that view up there at that 976 mark. Otherwise, if we continue to pull back, then I am watching the zone that I have between 965 down towards 952 is what I'll be watching for on the retracement to the downside. So that's potentially for my down end on the downside that I'm looking. If we do get continuation, we break today's high at 997.86 mark, then I'm watching my zone up here up to 1005 half all the way up towards 1014. So that's what I'll be looking for. Grant the fact you already had what that was about almost an 8% move today. Again, you're going to see a little bit more of a stagnation in which you're not going to get this kind of explosive move tomorrow. So hopefully you didn't chase and you didn't go too far out of the money and swinging a call position because you already had about an 80, a 73 point move almost. So I wouldn't expect too much of an explosive move in continuation tomorrow. That's why I'm a little bit more considerate about where my targets are over this 1K mark. And I do know that that 1K mental target is still going to be relatively tough to get past tomorrow. So I would not be surprised to see if by tomorrow morning we get that early morning dip and then we see the recovery and we get a continuation testing that 1K resistance, which is likely going to be the fact that we probably end up testing that 1K resistance maybe 2 to 3 times before we get that full break and then we get over that 1005 mark. So that's just something to keep in mind. But 1005 was the mark I was watching. I was hoping they would squeeze it into the close today and just rip it over that 1K mark today in the close. We didn't get that. We kind of got more so of a little bit more of a pullback. But nonetheless, that's fine. So I'll be watching 1005 up to that 1015 if you want to say that zone, in which I'll be watching. It's about a $10 range that I'll be watching for the upside. And then obviously you want to look to see if you can catch this any kind of buying opportunity off the VWAP at that 976 level. All right. So that's Tesla I'm watching. The other one that's just been incredible the past few days is Apple. Apple and Tesla, I think, had the most relative strength across the board for the past few days in this entire 6 day rally. Of course, names catching up was Amazon and Microsoft to a lesser degree, but Apple and Tesla have pretty much just carried us for these past 6 days that we've been green. So looking at this one, obviously we see the anchor view up yet again from that most recent high, January 4th. We actually broke out of it very convincingly today. We actually hit right into that VWAP yesterday that we smacked it at that 166.36 mark. We broke over that very convincingly today. So I'm going to look to see if we get any pullback, look to see if we act as support on that VWAP 166.36. Otherwise, if we break over in my upper end here, we break today's high over that 169.42, then I'm watching a move that stretches us towards 171. And that'll be where my top end target is that I'm watching. Otherwise, we get a pullback and we lose that anchor view up at that 166.36. Then I'm watching a pullback down here towards that 164 half, towards 163. So that's what I'll be looking for with Apple. Just the fact that it's had such an incredible run, you could see potentially that this ends up rolling over if we do lose that anchor view up. So that's just something to keep in mind. So that'll be about a $2 downside once you end up dropping below that view up. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other one was Boeing. Boeing, despite the fact that we had the news over the weekend with Boeing, we all know about the plane crash that we had. That's just incredible that Boeing didn't even really give a crap about that at all, right? We actually, this one actually is pretty much ran right into resistance here today, and obviously we see it's pulled back. It's pretty much regressed from the high quite a bit here, about a dollar or so, maybe I want to say $2. We hit the anchor VWAP pretty much. That's pretty much the recent high that we had from February 10th. So we ended up smacking that. It's pretty much sitting at 193.07. We'll see if we end up getting that break tomorrow over the 193.07. If we get that push, then I can see us making a move towards the resistance of this ascending broadening wedge formation that I have drawn, and that puts us close enough to about 198 is what I'll be watching. All right, so 197, 198 is what I'm watching to pretty much smack the resistance on this descending broadening wedge. Otherwise, if we continue to regress, then I'm watching us coming down towards the support of this, and that's going to be pretty much sitting right about 183, and we'll see this pretty much roll over pretty heavily. All right, we'll see some serious selling pressure. Other than that one, the other name was Microsoft. This is one that I was looking to short this in particular. It's just the fact of where it's sitting in distance towards anchored view up. I wanted to say sideline and wait to see what we get tomorrow. But watching the anchor view up that I pretty much have set back from the most recent high was November 22nd of last year. We're about to smack that sitting at 308.35, and I'll be watching that one to see if we make that push, maybe a possible gap up tomorrow. And that's just sitting right within my zone that I already had there. 307, about 307 half towards that 309 mark, in which it's right in between from that anchor view up. So I'll be watching that. Otherwise, we lose the low that we had today. We lose that 298.77, and I'm watching a pullback between this 297 to 296 is what I'll be watching for on any kind of regression, in which we'll see some selling pressure start to mount with volatility pretty much adding on top of that. All right. Facebook, is Facebook actually running after hours? I mean, it's showing pretty flat to red right now. So I'm not sure about that, Randy. Um, 1 second. All right, my bad. All right, so other one pretty much was Facebook. I think the last one I was gonna touch bases on was Amazon. Facebook was pretty much obviously we saw the 220 calls. I know that everyone's pretty much been aware of the flow alerts that we've had the past few days with Facebook. They were just literally knocking the door on Facebook 220 calls. But I think in the same breath, the same the Facebook 220 calls that we saw in the flow alerts, I think the same thing can be said about the Tesla that we've been seeing, in which they've been pretty much hitting 1,000 calls very repeatedly, and we saw how that ended up playing out today. So, granted the fact that we saw them hitting the 220 calls yesterday, we're getting about a $6 move that we had. Pretty much, I believe it was a little bit more than $6. You could say it was about an $8 move that we actually had towards the high of the day here today. That was a strong, pretty much continuation off of all that flow that we had the past few days on Facebook, like we did with Tesla as well on the 1,000 calls. So that's just something to keep in mind, especially when you start seeing these repeated calls, like we saw with the Tesla on Facebook. Something to keep in your mind as you move forward when you start to see call flow just going in repeated like that, it usually seems like there's a lot of accumulation, and that's basically what we had out of both of these names. But nonetheless, we pretty much got right into our resistance. They kept it right under that 220 mark, so they pretty much prevented the 220 calls from going in the money. So we'll see. We pretty much are sitting right in the middle of what our anchor VWAP is here, just below about a dollar over it, right around that 215.56 mark. We'll see if we can hold that by tomorrow morning or not. Otherwise, if we get a continuation, we can likely push the high that we had today, 219.46, and my overall PT is sitting right at 221. That'll be what I'll be watching. Otherwise, if we lose this anchored view up at that 215.56, I think this might be a little bit more of a rollover, and we could see this retrace all the way back down towards 206 mark, and that's not going to be pretty. So that's what I'll be watching for on Facebook. And then just the last one to pretty much wrap up our session here was the Amazon. Uh, Amazon was a little bit more of a disappointment to me. I kind of expected a little bit more of an explosive move out of Amazon. Granted, the fact that we already had all the news about the split, we saw so much accumulation even during the times when market volatility was pretty elevated. I expected a little bit more of an explosive type of price action here. Granted, the fact that we had Tesla explode midday and it's actually up more than what Amazon is, it's just a little bit more of a head scratch, a little surprising to me. I anticipated that we would have a bigger and better move out of this one. So, but nonetheless, I'll be watching to see continuation. Maybe we get over this high that we have over this 33.23 mark, and I'm watching my supply zone of sitting up here between 33.50 up towards 33.78 is what I'll be watching. So that's pretty much my target, my supply zone in which I see sellers starting to step in up there. Otherwise, if we lose today's low under this 32.33 mark, then I could see us come down between 32.06 to 31.79 here. And then we're pretty much flirting with that view up at 31.61, in which we're basically going to give up the entire move that we have today. So that's pretty much the names that I just wanted to highlight. Again, I thought it was better to go over the cues pretty much where we're sitting after such a 6 day rally. I think it was pretty much more important to see all of those names rather than do a ticker request today. So that kind of wraps up the names that I was gonna go through today. Not necessarily doing ticker requests today, guys, but I think tomorrow's going to be more contingent upon what Powell is really going to say tomorrow morning. Is he really going to snap the 6 day green streak? Because you would have to anticipate at some point here, whether it be tomorrow or the day after, someone has to give in which we're going to end up snapping this rally because this has been one of the most historical rallies that we've had in this 6 day period. So that's something I'll be watching, waiting to listen to tomorrow morning, and then we'll pretty much play it by ear by market open, and we'll be able to determine where we're pretty much headed once we get Powell out of the way tomorrow morning. All right. But other than that, that kind of wraps up the session tonight, guys. Not doing ticker requests because I wanted to make sure I covered the cues for everyone that's pretty much looking. Tesla to 2500, although you are insanely crazy, my guy. I actually heard someone saying that their overall PT was like 1500 on Tesla, and they were not gonna sell until they hit 1500. I don't know about all that. I think 1015. If you really wanted to stretch it, 1022 would be my high end target on Tesla. I don't think it gets past that. I think that's literally my top end of what I'm looking at with Tesla. I don't think anything's changed in the sense that Tesla should be going over 1022, in which this rally really continues to push beyond having a 6 day green streak and already such a historic rally. All right. But other than that, appreciate you guys joining. Hopefully, the levels I was watching on the cues kind of give you a better idea if the rally does continue, or vice versa. If we do see some downside pressure, in terms of where your supports and where your demand zones that we're currently looking at. All right. But other than that, that kind of wraps up the session tonight, guys. Hopefully that helps you guys. But I appreciate you guys joining. I'll see you guys on live tomorrow. But I'm out. Appreciate it, guys. Later.